This timeline of Christian missions chronicles the global expansion of Christianity through a listing of the most significant missionary outreach events. Apostolic age. Earliest dates must all be considered approximate. 33 Great Commission of Jesus to go and make disciples of all nations. Pentecost. A day in which 3,000 Jews from a variety of Mediterranean basin nations are converted to faith in Jesus Christ. 34 In Gaza. Philip baptizes a convert, an Ethiopian who was already a Jewish proselyte. 34 Saul of Tarsus is converted and becomes Paul. 39 Peter preaches to a Gentile audience in the house of Cornelius in Caesarea Maritima. 42 Mark goes to Alexandria in Egypt. 47 Paul, formerly known as Saul of Tarsus, begins his first missionary journey to western Anatolia, part of modern-day Turkey via Cyprus. 50 Council of Jerusalem on admitting Gentiles into the Church. 51 Paul begins his second missionary journey, a trip that will take him through modern-day Turkey and on into Greece. 52 Thomas arrives in Malabar and Coromandel Coast in India and founds church that subsequently becomes the Syrian Malabar Nazranis. 54 Paul begins his third missionary journey. 60 Paul sent to Rome under Roman guard, evangelizes on Malta after shipwreck. 66 Thaddeus establishes the Christian Church of Armenia. 69 Andrew is crucified in Patras on the Peloponnese Peninsula of Greece. 81st Christians reported in Tunisia and France. Early Christianity. 101st Christians are reported in Monaco, Algeria. A missionary goes to Arbela, a sacred city of the Assyrians that the Christian Church is Catholicos. Universal. 112 Pliny the Younger reports rapid growth of Christianity in Bithynia. 140 Hermes writes, "The Son of God has been preached to the ends of the earth." 150 Gospel reaches Portugal and Morocco. 166 Bishop Sota writes that the number of Christians has surpassed the Jews. 167 At the request of Lucius of Britain, missionaries Fuganus, Orphagon, and Duvianus, or Jeruvian, were sent by Pope Eleuterus to convert the Britons to Christianity. 174 First Christians reported in Austria. 177 churches in Lyon and Vienne, southern France, report being persecuted. 190 Pater Ennis of Alexandria goes to India in response to an appeal for Christian teachers. 196 In Ashuristan, Parthian-ruled Assyria, barred days and rites of Christians among the Assyrians, Parthians, Bactrians, Kushans, and other peoples in the Persian Empire. 197 Tertullian writes that Christianity had penetrated all ranks of society in North Africa. 198 to 199 The first missionaries, the Kung-Yue, arrive in Japan by boat from China. 201st Christians are reported in Switzerland and Belgium. 206 Abgar, the Syriac king of Edessa, embraces the Christian faith. 208 Tertullian writes that Christ has followers on the far side of the Roman wall in Britain, where Roman legions have not yet penetrated. 250 Denis, or Denis, a Dionysius, is sent from Rome along with 6 other missionaries who establish the church in Paris. 270 Death of Gregory Thaumaturgus, Christian leader in Pontus. It was said that when Gregory became bishop, there were only 17 Christians in Pontus, while at his death 30 years later there were only 17 non-Christians. 281st Rural churches emerge in northern Italy. Christianity is no longer exclusively in urban areas. 287 Maurice from Egypt is killed at Agaruno. Switzerland for refusing to sacrifice to pagan divinities. 300 First Christians reported in Greater Khorasan. An estimated 10% of the world's population is now Christian. Parts of the Bible are available in 10 different languages. 304 Armenia accepts Christianity as state religion. 306 The first bishop of Nisibis is ordained. 313 Emperor Constantine issues Edict of Milan, legalizing Christianity in the Roman Empire. 314 Tiridates III of Armenia and King Ernest of Caucasian Albania converted by Gregory the Illuminator. Era of the Seven Ecumenical Councils. 327 Georgian King Mirian III of Iberia converted by Nino. 330 Ethiopian King Ezana of Axum makes Christianity an official religion. 332 Two young Roman Christians, Frumentius and Aedesius, are the sole survivors of a ship destroyed in the Red Sea due to tensions between Rome and Axum. They are taken as slaves to the Ethiopian capital of Axum to serve in the royal court. 334 The first bishop is ordained for Merv Transoxiana, area of modern-day Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan and southwest Kazakhstan. 337 Emperor Constantine baptized shortly before his death. 341 Ulfilas begins work with the Goths in present-day Romania. 350 Bible is translated into Syriac, an Egyptian language. 354 Theophilus, the Indian, reports visiting Christians in India. Philostorgius mentions a community of Christians on the Socotra Islands, south of Yemen in the Arabian Sea. 364 Conversion of Vandals to Christianity begins during reign of Emperor Valens. 370 Wulfila translates the Bible into Gothic, the first Bible translation done specifically for missionary purposes. 378 Jerome writes, from India to Britain, all nations resound with the death and resurrection of Christ. 380 Roman Emperor Theodosius I makes Christianity the official state religion. 382 Jerome is commissioned to translate the Gospels, and subsequently the whole Bible, into Latin. 386 Augustine of Hippo converted. 397 Ninian evangelizes the southern Picts of Scotland. 3 missionaries sent to the mountaineers in the Trento region of northern Italy are martyred. 400 Hayyan begins proclaiming gospel in Yemen after having been converted in Hurta on the Persian border. In starting a school for native Gothic evangelists, John Chrysostom writes, "Go and make disciples of all nations was not said for the apostles only, but for us also." 410 New Testament translated into Armenian. 420 Pre-Islam Arabian Bedouin tribe under Sheikh Peter Aspebit is converted. 425 The first bishops are ordained for Herat, Afghanistan, and Samarkand, Uzbekistan. 432 Patrick goes to Ireland as missionary. 451 Christians reported in Liechtenstein. 496 Conversion of Clovis I, King of Franks in Gaul, along with 3,000 warriors. 499 Persian King Kavad I, fleeing his country, meets a group of Christian missionaries going to Central Asia to preach to the Turks. 500 First Christians reported in North Yemen. Naram becomes Christian center. 508 Philoxenus of Mabarg begins translation of the Bible into Syriac. 529 Benedict of Nursia destroys pagan temple at Monte Cassino, Italy and builds a monastery. 535 The Hippolyte Huns, nomads living in northern China and Central Asia, who were also known as the White Huns, are taught to read and write by Nestorian missionaries. 542 Julian, or Julianus, from Constantinople begins evangelizing Nubia, accompanied by an Egyptian named Theodore. 563 Columba sails from Ireland to Scotland, where he founds an evangelistic training centre on Iona. 569 Longinus, church leader in Nobatia, evangelizes Al-Audia, in what is now Sudan. 578 Conversion to Christianity of Numan III, last of Lakhmids, pre-Islam Arab prince. 585 Irish missionary Columbanus arrives with 12 fellow missionaries in Brittany, France. 592 Death of Celtic, Irish missionary Moluag, Old Irish, Moluach. 596 Gregory the Great sends Augustine and a team of missionaries to what is now England to reintroduce the gospel. The missionaries settle in Canterbury and within a year baptize 10,000 people. 600 First Christian settlers in Andorra, between France and Spain. 604 8 churches reportedly planted on Thorney Island, where Westminster Abbey now stands. 610 St. Columbanus and St. Gall flee from Lucoy, France, to Alemania and preach the gospel in Tuggen and Bregins. 627 Conversion of King Edwin of Northumbria. 629 Amandus of Elnan is consecrated a missionary bishop. He evangelized the region around Ghent and went on missions to Slavs along the Danube and to Basques in Navarre. 630 Conversion of the East Angles, one of the 7 kingdoms of the Anglo-Saxon Heptarchy. 635 First Christian missionaries, Nestorian monks, including Alepen, from Asia Minor and Persia arrive in China. Aidan of Lindisfarne begins evangelizing in the heart of Northumbria, England. 637 Lombards, a German people living in northern Italy, become Christians. 638 A church building is erected in Chang'an, then perhaps the largest city in the world. See Dakin Pagoda. 647 Amadeus, Bishop of Maastricht, carries out missionary work in Frisia, Netherlands, and among the Slavs. 651st Church organized in Netherlands. 673 Irish monk Mal Ruva founds a training centre at Apricrisson that would serve as a base for missionary outreach into Scotland. 681st Translation of Christian scriptures into Arabic. 687 Conversion of Sussex. 689 Pagans kill Irish missionary Kilian near Würzburg in what is now Germany. 692 Willie Broad and 11 companions cross the North Sea to become missionaries to the Frisians, modern-day Netherlands. 697 Muslims overrun Carthage, capital of North Africa. 720 Caliph Umar II puts heavy pressure on the Christian Berbers to convert to Islam. 716 Boniface begins missionary work among Germanic tribes. 724 Boniface fells pagan sacred oak of Thor at Geismar in Hesse, Germany. 732 Muslim advance from Spain and southern France, stopped by Charles Martel at Tours and Poitiers. 740 Irish monks reach Iceland. 771 Charlemagne becomes king and will decree that sermons be given in the vernacular. He also commissioned Bible translations. 781 Nestorian stele erected near Xi'an, China, to commemorate the propagation in China of the luminous religion, thus providing a written record of a Christian presence in China. 787 Liuja begins missionary work among the pagans near the mouth of the Ems River, in Germany. Middle Ages. 822 Moj Mirai of Great Moravia converts to Christianity. 826 Ansgar from France is sent by papal authority to Denmark as a royal chaplain and missionary. Harold Clack is baptized along with 400 of his followers at Mainz. 828 First Christian church in present-day Slovakia is built in Nitra. First missionaries reached the area that is now the Czech Republic. 830 Scots-born Erloof is evangelizing in what is now Germany when he is killed by the Vandals. 859 Execution of Eulogius, proponent of confrontational Christian witness in Spain and other Muslim-dominated societies. Opposed to any feeling of affinity with Muslim culture, Eulogius advocated using a missiology of martyrdom to confront Islam. 863 Cyril and Methodius are invited by Rastislav to evangelize in Great Moravia and the Balatin Principality. 864 Conversion of Prince Boris of Bulgaria. 867 All Serbian tribes are fully Christianized. 878 Last definite reference to Christians in China before the Mongol era. 881 Slavic archbishopric established in Great Moravia, with Methodius as its head. Bible translated into Slavonic. 900 missionaries from the Archdiocese of Bremen-Hamburg reach Norway. 912 The Normans become Christian. 948 The leader of the Magyars converts to Christianity. 957 Princess Olga of Kiev baptized. 965 Harold I of Denmark converts to Christianity and smooths the way for the acceptance of Christian faith by the Danish people. 966 Moscow I of Poland converts to Christianity and begins the period of Christian Poland. 987 Nestorian monks visiting China find no traces of Christian community left. 988 Baptism of Kiev and Rus under Vladimir I. 995 Christian missionaries from Norway begin working in Iceland. 997 Adalbert of Prague dies as a martyr in Prussia. 1000 to 1499. 1000 Christianity accepted by common consent in Iceland by Parliament. Althing. Leif the Lucky introduces the gospel to Greenland, possibly Vinland, Newfoundland. 1003 The Hungarian king sends evangelists to Transylvania. 1008 Siegfried, or Sigurd, English missionary, baptizes King Olaf of Sweden. 1009 Bruno of Querfurt is beheaded in Prussia where he had gone as a missionary. 1015 Russia is said to have been comprehensively converted to the Orthodox faith. Olaf II Haraldsson becomes the first king of the whole of Norway. Over the next 15 years he would organize Norway's final conversion and its integration into Christian Europe. 1017 Gunther tries to convert the inhabitants of Vorpommern. The mission is not successful. 1122 Bernard, later Bishop of Lebus, launches an unsuccessful mission in the Duchy of Pomerania. 1124 28th Otto von Bamberg succeeds in the conversion of Pomerania. Bishopric of Kamen established in Pomerania in 1140. 1168 Absalon subdues and converts the Principality of Rügen. 1200 The Bible is now available in 22 different languages. 1210 Franciscan Order established. 1216 Dominican Order established. 1219 Francis of Assisi presents the Gospel to the Sultan of Egypt. 1227 Prince Bort converted and baptized in the Ukraine. 1244 Christians are reported in Lithuania, with King Mindaugas being baptized in 1251. 1253 Franciscan William of Rubruck begins his journey to the Mongols. 1266 Mongol leader Khan sends Marco Polo's father and uncle, Niccolo and Matteo Polo, back to Europe with a request to the Pope to send 100 Christian missionaries. Only 2 responded and 1 died before reaching Mongol territory. 1276 Ramon Lull opens training center to send missionaries to North Africa. 1291 Appointment of first indigenous bishop in Finland. 1294 Franciscan Giovanni di Monte Corvino arrives in China. 1303 Arnold of Cologne arrives in China to assist Giovanni di Monte Corvino. 1321 Jordanus, a Dominican monk, arrives in India as the first resident Roman Catholic missionary. 1322 Odoric of Pordenone, a Franciscan monk from Italy, arrives in China. 1323 Franciscans make contacts on Sumatra, Java, and Borneo. 1326 Chagatai Khan Ilkhijdai grants permission for a church to be built in Samarkand, Uzbekistan. 1329 Nicaea falls to Muslim Ottoman Turks. 1334 Chagatai Khan Buzan allows Christians to rebuild churches and permits Franciscans to establish a missionary episcopate in Al-Malik, Azerbaijan. 1368 Collapse of the Franciscan mission in China as Ming dynasty abolishes Christianity. 1379 Stephen of Perm travels north toward the White Sea and settles as a missionary among the Uralic-speaking Komi peoples living between Pekka and Vichegda rivers at Ustvim. 1382 Bible translated into English from Latin by John Wycliffe. 1386 Jogaila, baptized. Vladislav II, king of the Lithuanians, is baptized. 1389 Large numbers of Christians march through the streets of Cairo, denouncing Islam and lamenting that they had abandoned the religion of their fathers from fear of persecution. They were beheaded, both men and women, and a fresh persecution of Christians followed. 1400 Scriptures translated into Icelandic. 1408 Spanish Dominican Vincent Ferrer begins a ministry in Italy in which it is said that thousands of Jews and Muslims were won to faith in Christ. 1410 Bible is translated into Hungarian. 1420 Franciscan missionaries accompany Portuguese expedition to Madeira. 1431 Franciscan missionaries accompany Portuguese expedition to the Azores. 1435 Forced conversion of Jews in Palma de Mallorca, Spain. 1445 First Christians reported in Guinea-Bissau. 1448 First Christians reported in Mauritania. 1450 Franciscan missionaries accompany Portuguese expedition to the Cape Verde Islands. 1453 Constantinople falls to the Muslim Ottoman Turks who make it their capital. An Islamic service of thanksgiving is held in the Church of St. Sophia. 1455 With the Bull Romanus Pontifex the patronage of missions in new countries behind Cape Bojador is given to the Portuguese. See Padroado. 1462 Johannes Gutenberg begins printing the Bible with his movable type printing process. Pope Pius II assigns the evangelization of the Portuguese Guinea coast of Africa to the Franciscans led by Alfonso de Bolaño. 1485 After having come into contact with the Portuguese, the King of Benin requests that a church be planted in his kingdom. 1486 Dominicans become active in West Africa, notably among the Wolof people in Senegambia. 1489 Baptism of Wolof King Bahemwa in Senegal. 1491 The Congo sees its first group of missionaries arrive. Under the ministry of these Franciscan and Dominican priests, the king would soon be baptized and a church built at the royal capital. 1492 Birth of the Church in Angola. 1493 Pope Alexander VI allows Spain to colonize the New World with Catholic missions. Christopher Columbus takes Christian priests with him on his second journey to the New World. 1494 – First missionaries arrive in Dominican Republic. 1495 – The head of a convent in Seville, Spain, Mercedarian Jorge, makes a trip to the West Indies. 1496 – First Christian baptisms in the New World take place when Guatacaba along with other members of his household are baptized on the island of Hispaniola. 1497 – Forced conversion of Jews in Portugal. 1498 – First Christians are reported in Kenya. 1499 – Portuguese Augustinian missionaries arrive at Zanzibar. Their mission will end in 1698 due to the Oman Arab conquest. 1500 to 1600. 1500 Franciscans enter Brazil with Cabral. 1501 Portuguese explorer João da Nova builds a chapel at Mossel Bay, the first one in South Africa. 1501 Pope Alexander VI grants to the Crown of Spain all the newly discovered countries in the Americas, on condition that provision be made for the religious instruction of the native populations. 1502 Bartolomé de las Casas, who will later become an ardent defender of the indigenous peoples of the Americas, goes to Cuba. For his military services there he will be given an encomienda, an estate that included the services of the indigenous peoples of the Americas living on it. 1503 Mar Elijah, Patriarch of the East Syrian Church, sends 3 missionaries to the islands of the sea which are inside Java and to China. Quote, 1506 Mission work begun in Mozambique. 1508 Franciscans begin evangelizing in Venezuela. 1509 First church building constructed on Puerto Rico. 1510 Dominicans begin work in Haiti. 1511 Martin de Valencia came to believe that Psalm chapter 58 prophesied the conversion of all unbelievers. While reflecting on the scripture passage, he asked, "When will this be? When will this prophecy be filled? We are already in the afternoon, at the end of our days, and the world's final era." Later that same week, while reading aloud from the prophet Isaiah, he reportedly saw a vision of vast multitudes being converted and baptized. He began to pray to be chosen to preach and convert all heathen. He would die 20 years later as a missionary to Mexico. 1512 Dominican missionary Antonio de Montesino returns to Spain to try to convince King Ferdinand that all is not as it should be in the new western colonies. He reported that on the islands of Hispaniola, now Dominican Republic, and Haiti, and Cuba, the indigenous peoples were rapidly dying out under the system of slavery used by the colonists. 1513 in Cuba, Bartolomé de las Casas is ordained, possibly the first ordination in the New World. Soon thereafter, Las Casas will renounce all claims to his Indian serfs. 1515 Portuguese missionary Francisco Alvarez is sent on a diplomatic mission to De Witt II, the Negus or Emperor of Abyssinia, an old name for Ethiopia. 1515 Portuguese missionaries begin work in Benin, Nigeria. 1517 The Mughal rulers of Delhi open the door of Bengal to Christian missionaries. 1518 Don Henrique, son of the King of the Congo, is consecrated by Pope Leo X as the first indigenous bishop from sub-Saharan Black Africa. 1519 Two Franciscans accompany Hernan Cortés in his expedition to Mexico. 1520 German missionary Maximilian Uhland, also known as Bernardino de San Jose, goes to Hispaniola with the newly appointed Bishop Alessandro Geraldini. 1521 Pope Leo X grants Franciscan Francis Quinon's permission and faculties to go as a missionary to the New World together with Juan Clapian. 1522 Portuguese missionaries establish presence on coast of Sri Lanka and begin moving inland in the wake of Portuguese military units. 1523 Martin Luther writes a missionary hymn based on Psalm chapter 67. May God bestow on us His grace. It has been called the first missionary hymn of Protestantism. Quote, 1524 Martin de Valencia goes to New Spain with 12 Franciscan friars. 1525 Italian Franciscan missionary Giulio Zarco is sent to Michoacán on the western coast of Mexico, where he will become very proficient in some of the indigenous languages. 1526 Franciscans enter Florida. 12 Dominican friars arrive in the Mexican capital. 1527 Martyrs Synod, organized by Anabaptists. It is the first Protestant missionary conference. 1528 Franciscan missionary Juan de Padilla arrives in Mexico. He will accompany Coronado's expedition searching for the 7 cities and eventually settle among the Quivira, now called the Wichita. 1529 Franciscan Peter of Ghent writes from Latin America that he and a colleague had baptized 14,000 people on one day. 1531 Franciscan Juan de Padilla begins a series of missionary tours among Indian tribes southeast of Mexico City. 1532 Evangelization of Peru begins when missionaries arrive with Francisco Pizarro's military expedition. 1533 The Pechenga Monastery is founded in the extreme north of Russia to preach gospel to the Sami people. Augustinian order arrives in Mexico. First Christian missionaries arrive in Tonkin, what is now Vietnam. 1534 The entire caste of Paravas on the Coromandel coast are baptized. Perhaps 20,000 people in all. 1536 Northern Italian Anabaptist missionary Hans Oberecker is burned at the stake in Vienna. 1537 Pope Paul III orders that the indigenous peoples of the Americas of the New World be brought to Christ by the preaching of the divine word, and with the example of the good life. Quote, 1538 Franciscans enter Paraguay. 1539 The pueblos of what is now the U.S. Southwest are encountered by Spanish Franciscan missionary Marcos de Niza. 1539 Together with 2 friends Ignatius of Loyola forms the Society of Jesus, which is approved by Pope Paul III 1 year later. 1540 Franciscans arrive in Trinidad and are killed by cannibals. 1541 Franciscans begin establishing missions in California. 1542 Francis Xavier goes to Portuguese colony of Goa in West India. 1543 Anabaptist Menno Simons leaves the Netherlands and begins planting churches in Germany. 1544 Franciscan Andres de Olmos leads group of Indian converts to Tamaulipas. 1545 Testifying to the power that letters back home from missionaries have had. Antonio Araoz writes about Francis Xavier. No less fruit has been obtained in Spain and Portugal through his letters than has been obtained in the Indies through his teaching. Quote, 1546 Xavier travels to the Indonesian islands of Morotai, Ambon, and Ternate. 1547 Wealthy Spaniard Juan Fernandez becomes a Jesuit. He will go to Japan as a missionary. 1548 Xavier founds the College of the Holy Name of God in Bacum on the northwest coast of India. 1549 Dominican Luis Cancer, who had worked among the Mayans of Guatemala and Mexico, lands at Tampa Bay, Florida, with 2 companions. They are immediately killed by the Calusa. 1549 Jesuit missionaries led by Xavier arrive in Japan and built a base in Kyushu. Their aggressive proselytizing was most successful in Kyushu, with about 100,000 to 200,000 converts, including many daimyos. 1550 Printed scriptures are available in 28 languages. 1551 Dominican Jerome de Loaiza founds the National University of San Marcos in Lima, Peru. as well as a hospital for indigenous peoples. 1553 Portuguese missionaries build a church in Malacca town, Malaysia. 1554 to 1500 converts to Christianity are reported in Siam, now called Thailand. 1555 John Calvin sends Huguenots to Brazil. 1555 The first failed attempt to set up a Christian mission in Cambodia by Dominican Gaspar da Cruz. 1556 Gaspar da Cruz spends a month preaching in Guangzhou, China. 1557 Jesuit Bishop André de Oviedo arrives in Ethiopia with 5 priests to convert the local Ethiopian Christians to Catholicism. 1558 The Kabydian Duke Sultan Idarov converts to Orthodox Christianity. 1559 Missionary Viola settles in Kyoto, Japan. 1560 Goncalo da Silveira, a Portuguese Jesuit missionary, visited the Munhu-Mutapa Empire, where he rapidly made converts. 1562 Diego de Landa burns the libraries of the Maya civilization. 1563 Jesuit missionary Luis Frois, who will later write a history of Jesuit activity in Japan, arrives in that country. Omura Sumatada becomes the first daimyo, feudal landholder, to convert to Christianity. 1564 Legazpi begins Augustinian work in Philippine Islands. 1565 Jesuits arrive in Macau. 1566 The first Jesuit to enter what is now the United States, Pedro Martinez, is clubbed to death by fearful Indians on the sands of Fort George Island, Florida. 1567 Missionaries Geronimo da Cruz and Sebastião da Canto, both Dominicans, arrive at Ayutthaya, Thailand. 1568 In the Philippines, Diego de Herrera baptizes chieftain Tupas of Cebu and his son. 1569 Geronimo da Cruz is murdered along with 2 newly arrived missionaries. 1570 Ignacio Azevedo and 39 other Jesuit missionaries are killed by pirates near Palma, one of the Canary Islands, while on the way to Brazil. 1571 Capuchin friars of the strict observance arrive on the island of Trinidad with Conquistador Don Juan Ponce of Seville. 1572 Jesuits arrive in Mexico. 1573 Large-scale evangelization of the Florida Indian nations and tribes begins with the arrival of Franciscan friars. Augustinian order enters Ecuador. 1574 Augustinian Guillermo de Santa Maria writes a treatise on the illegitimacy of the war the Spanish government was waging against the Chichimeca in the Mexican state of Michoacán. 1575 Church building constructed in Kyoto, built in Japanese architectural style. It was popularly called the Temple of the South Barbarians. 1575 Spanish Augustinians Martin de Rada and Geronimo Martin spend 4 months in Fujian, China, trying to arrange for long-term missionary work there. The attempt ends in failure due to unrelated events in the Philippines. 1577 Dominicans enter Mozambique and penetrate inland, burning Muslim mosques as they go. 1578 King of Spain orders the Bishop of Lima not to confer holy orders on mestizos. 1579 Jesuit Alessandro Valignano arrives in Japan where, as visitor of missions, he formulates a basic strategy for Catholic proselytism in that country. Valignano's adaptationism attempted to avoid cultural frictions by covering the gap between certain Japanese customs and Roman Catholic values. 1580 Japanese daimyo, feudal landholder, Arima Harunobu becomes Christian and takes the name Protasio. 1582 Jesuits, with Michel Ruggieri and Matteo Ricci as the pioneers, begin mission work in mainland China. Introduce Western science, mathematics, astronomy, 1583 – 5 Jesuit missionaries are murdered near Goa, India. 1584 – Matteo Ricci and a Chinese scholar translate a catechism into Chinese under the title Tian Zhu Shi Lu, a true account of God. 1585 – Carmelite leader Jerome Gratian meets with Martin Ignatius de Loyola, a Franciscan missionary from China. The two sign a vinculo de hermandad misionera, a bond of missionary brotherhood, by which the two orders would collaborate in missionary work in Ethiopia, China, the Philippines, and the East and West Indies. 1586 – Portuguese missionary João dos Santos reports that locals kill elephants to protect their crops in Sofala, Mozambique. 1587 – All foreigners ordered out of Japan when Shogun fears they are as divisive and might present the Europeans with an opportunity to disrupt Japan. They stay but persecution escalates. Manteo becomes the first American Indian to be baptized by the Church of England. 1590 – A book by Belgian pastor Hadriana Saravia has a chapter arguing that the Great Commission is still binding on the Church today because the Apostles did not fulfill it completely. 1591 – First Catholic Church built in Trinidad. First Chinese admitted as members of the Jesuit order. 1593 – The Franciscans arrive in Japan and establish St. Anna's Hospital in Kyoto. They dispute with the Jesuits. 1594 – First Jesuit missionaries arrive in what is today Pakistan. 1595 – Dutch East India Company chaplains expand their ministry beyond the European expatriates. 1596 – Jesuit missionaries travel across the island of Samar in the Philippines to establish mission centers on the eastern side. 1597 – 26 Japanese Christians are crucified for their faith by General Toyotomi Hideyoshi in Nagasaki, Japan. Full-scale persecution destroys the Christian community by the 1620s. Converts who did not reject Christianity were killed. Many Christians went underground, but their communities died out. Christianity left no permanent imprint on Japanese society. 1598 Spanish missionaries push north from Mexico into what is now the state of New Mexico. 1599 Jesuit Francisco Fernandez goes to what is now the Jessore district of Bangladesh and builds a church there. 1600 to 1699. 1600 French missionaries arrive in the area of what is now Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan. 1601 First ordination of Japanese priests. 1602 Chinese scientist and translator Zhu Guangqi is baptized. 1603 The Jesuit mission press in Japan commences publication of a Japanese-Portuguese dictionary. 1604 Jesuit missionary Abbe Jesse Flesch arrives at Port Royal, Nova Scotia. 1605 Roberto de Nobili goes to India. 1606 Japanese shogun Tokugawa Ieyasu bans Christianity. 1607 missionary Juan Font establishes the first Jesuit mission among the Tarahumara in the Sierra Madre Mountains of northwest Mexico. 1608 A missionary expedition into the Ceará area of Brazil fails when the Taquarija kill the Jesuit leader. 1609 missionary Nicholas Trigo goes to China. He will soon, 1615, publish Ritchie's journals in Europe. 1610 Chinese mathematician and astronomer Li Jiazhou is baptized. 1611 Two Jesuits begin work among Mi'kmaq Indians of Nova Scotia. 1612 Jesuits found a mission for the Abenakis in Maine. 1613 missionary Alvarez de Semedo goes to China. 1614 anti-Christian edicts issued in Japan with over 40,000 Christians being massacred. 1615 French missionaries in Canada opened schools in Trois-Rivières and Tadoussac to teach First Nations children, with the hopes of converting them. 1616 Nanjing missionary case, in which the clash between Chinese practice of ancestor worship and Catholic doctrine ends in the deportation of foreign missionaries. Missionary Johann Adam Schall von Bell arrives in China. 1617 Portuguese missionary Francisco de Pina arrives in Vietnam. 1618 Portuguese Carmelites go from Persia to Pakistan to establish a church in Thatta, near Karachi. 1619 Dominican missionaries found the University of St. Thomas in the Philippine Islands. 1620 Carmelites enter Goa. 1621 The Augustinians establish themselves in Chittagong. 1622 Pope Gregory VI founds the Sacred Congregation for the Propagation of the Faith. This becomes the major papal agency for coordinating and directing missionary work. 1623 A stone monument, Nestorian stele, is unearthed in Xi'an, Xinanfu, China. Its inscription, written by a Syrian monk almost 1,000 years earlier and in both Chinese characters and Persian script, begins with the words, "Let us praise the Lord that the Christian faith has been popular in China." It told of the arrival of a missionary, Alo Pen Abraham, in AD 625. Alvaro Semedo and other Jesuits soon publicized the stele's discovery in Europe. 1624 Persecution intensifies in Japan, with 50 Christians being burned alive in Edo, now called Tokyo. 1625 Vietnam expels missionaries. 1626 After entering Japan in disguise, Jesuit missionary Francis Pacheco is captured and executed at Nagasaki. 1627 Alexandre de Rhodes goes to Vietnam, where in 3 years of ministry he baptizes 6,700 converts. 1628 Congregation for the Evangelization of Peoples established in Rome to train native clergy from all over the world. 1629 Franciscan missionary Alonso Benavides found Santa Clara de Capo on the border of Apache Indian country in what is now New Mexico. 1630 An attempt is made in the El Paso, Texas area to establish a mission among the Mansos Indians. 1631 Dutch clergyman Abraham Rogerius, anglicized as Roger, who authored Open Door to the Secrets of Heathendom. 1651 begins 10 years of ministry among the Tamil people in the Dutch colony of Pulicat near Madras, India. 1632 Zuni Indians murder a group of Franciscan missionaries who had 3 years earlier established the first mission to the Zunis at Horaku in what is now New Mexico. 1633 Emperor Fasilides expels the Jesuit missionaries in Ethiopia. The German Lutheran Church sends Peter Hailing as the first Protestant missionary to Ethiopia. 1634 Jesuit missionary Jean de Brebeuf travels to the Petun Nation in Canada, and baptizes a 40-year-old man. 1635 An expedition of Franciscans leaves Quito, Ecuador, to try to penetrate into Amazonia from the west, though most of them will be killed along the way. A few will manage to arrive 2 years later on the Atlantic coast. 1636 The Dominicans of Manila, the Philippines, organize a missionary expedition to Japan. They are arrested on one of the Okinawa Islands and will be eventually condemned to death by the Tribunal of Nagasaki. 1637 When smallpox kills thousands of Native Americans, tribal medicine men blame European missionaries for the disaster. 1638 Official ban of Christianity in Japan with death penalty. The Fountain opened. A posthumous work of the influential Puritan writer Richard Sibbes is published. in which he says that the gospel must continue its journey, till it have gone over the whole world. Quote, 1639, the first women to New France as missionaries. 3 Ursuline nuns, board Saint Joseph, and set sail for New France. 1640, Jesuit missionaries arrive on the Caribbean island of Martinique. 1641, Jesuit missionary Cristóbal Acuña describes the Amazon River in a written report to the King of Spain. 1642, Catholic missionaries Isaac Jogues and René Goupil are captured by Mohawk Indians as they return to Huron country from Quebec. Goupil was tomahawked to death while Jogues will be held for a period of time as a slave. He used his slavery as an opportunity for missionary work. 1643, John Campanius, Lutheran missionary to the Indians, arrives in America on the Delaware River. Reformed pastor Johannes Megapolensis begins outreach to Native Americans while pastoring at Albany, New York. 1644, John Eliot begins ministry to Algonquin Indians in North America. 1645, after 30 years of work in Vietnam, the Jesuits are expelled from that country. 1646, after being accused of being a sorcerer, Jesuit missionary Isaac Jogues is killed by the Iroquois. 1647, the Discalced Carmelites begin work on Madagascar. 1648, baptism of Helena and other members of the imperial Ming family. 1649, Society for the Propagation of the Gospel in New England formed to reach the Indians of New England. 1650, the destruction of Huronia by the Iroquois puts an end to the Jesuits' dream of making the Huron Indians the focal point of their evangelism. 1651, Count Truxas of Wetthausen, prominent Lutheran layman, asks the theological faculty of Wittenberg why Lutherans are not sending out missionaries in obedience to the Great Commission. 1652, Jesuit Antonio Vieira returns to Brazil as a missionary where he will champion the cause of exploited indigenous peoples until being expelled by Portuguese colonists. 1653, a Mohawk war party captures Jesuit Joseph Ponce near Montreal. He is tortured and will be finally sent back with a message about peace overtures. 1654, John Eliot publishes a catechism for American Indians. 1655, Ngurazinga, Princess of Matamba in Angola, is converted. Later she will write to the Pope urging that more missionaries be sent. 1656, first Quaker missionaries arrive in what is now Boston, Massachusetts. 1657, Thomas Mayhew, Jr. is lost at sea during a voyage to England that was to combine an appeal for missionary funds with personal business. 1658, after the flight of the French missionaries from his area, Chief Daniel Garriconi of the Onondaga Indians examines the customs of the French colonists and the doctrines of the missionaries and openly begins protecting Christians in his part of what is now New York. 1659, Jesuit Alexander de Rhodes establishes the Paris Foreign Missions Society. 1660, Christianity is introduced into Cambodia. 1661, George Fox, founder of the Religious Society of Friends, Quakers, sends 3 missionaries to China, although they never reached the field. 1662, French Jesuit missionary Julien Garnier sails for Canada. 1663, John Eliot's translation of the Bible into one of the Algonquin languages is published. The New Testament came out 2 years earlier. This Bible was the first complete Bible to be printed in the New World. 1664, Justinian von Wells authors 3 powerful pamphlets on the need for world missions. He will go to Dutch Guinea, now called Suriname, where he will die after only 3 months. 1665, Japanese feudal landholders, called daimyo, were ordered to follow the shogunate's example and to appoint inquisitors to do a yearly scrutiny of Christians. 1666 John Eliot publishes his The Indian Grammar, a book written to assist in conversion work among the Indians, described as some bones and ribs preparation for such a work. Eliot intended his grammar for missionaries wishing to learn the dialect spoken by the Massachusetts Indians. 1667 The first missionary to attempt to reach the Waorani, or Orcas, Jesuit Pedro Suarez, is slain with spears. 1668 In a letter from his post in Canada, French missionary Jacques Breuers laments his ignorance of the Oneida language. What can a man do who does not understand their language, and who is not understood when he speaks? As yet, I do nothing but stammer. Nevertheless, in 4 months I have baptized 60 persons, among whom there are only 4 adults, baptized in periculo mortis. All the rest are little children. Quote, 1669 Eager to compete with the Jesuits for conversion of the Indian nations on the western Great Lakes, Sulpulchan missionaries François d'Oliard de Casson and René Brehant de Galinée set out from Montreal with 27 men in 7 canoes led by 2 canoes of Seneca Indians. 1670 Jesuits establish missions on the Orinoco River in Venezuela. 1671 Quaker missionaries arrive in the Carolinas. 1672 A chieftain on Guam kills Jesuit missionary Diego Luis de San Vitores and his Visayan assistant, Pedro Calungsod, for having baptized the chief's daughter without his permission. Some accounts say the girl's mother consented to the baptism. 1673 French trader Louis Joliet and missionary Jacques Marquette visit what is now the state of Illinois, where the latter establishes a mission for Native Americans. 1674 Vincentian mission to Madagascar collapses after 25 years of abortive effort. 1675 An uprising on the islands of Micronesia leads to the death of 3 Christian missionaries. 1676 Kateri Tekakwitha, who became known as the Lily of the Mohawks, is baptized by a Jesuit missionary. She, along with many other Native Americans, joins a missionary settlement in Canada where a syncretistic blend of ascetic indigenous and Catholic beliefs evolves. 1678 French missionaries Jean Lassalle and Louis Hennepin discover Niagara Falls. 1679 Writing from Changzhou, newly arrived missionary Juan de Irigoyen describes 3 Christian congregations flourishing in that Chinese city. 1680 The Pueblo Revolt begins in New Mexico with the killing of 21 Franciscan missionaries. 1681 After arriving in New Spain, Italian Jesuit Eusebio Kino soon becomes what one writer described as the most picturesque missionary pioneer of all North America. A bundle of evangelistic zeal. Kino was also an explorer, astronomer, cartographer, mission builder, ranchman, cattle king, and defender of the frontier. 1682 to 13 missionaries go to remote cities in East Siberia. 1683 missionary Louis Hennepin returns to France after exploring Minnesota and being held captive by the Dakota to write the first book about Minnesota, Description de la Louisiane. 1684 Louis XIV of France sends Jesuit missionaries to China bearing gifts from the collections of the Louvre and the Palace of Versailles. 1685 Consecration of first Catholic bishop of Chinese origin. 1686 Russian Orthodox monks arrive in China as missionaries. 1687 St. Joseph Vaz arrives in Sri Lanka where he revives Catholicism after persecution from the Dutch. 1687 French activity begins in what is now Ivory Coast when missionaries land at Assini. 1688 New Testament translated into the Malay language. The first Bible translation into a language of Southeast Asia. 1689 Calusa Indian chief from what is the state of Florida visits Cuba to discuss idea of having missionaries come to his people. 1691 Franciscan missionaries arrive in Texas. 1691 Christian Faith Society for the West Indies was organized with a focus on evangelizing African slaves. 1692 Chinese Kangxi Emperor permits the Jesuits to freely preach Christianity, converting whom they wish. 1693 Jesuit missionary John de Brito is publicly beheaded in India. 1694 missionary and explorer Eusebio Kino becomes the first European to enter the Tucson, Arizona basin and create a lasting settlement. 1695 China's first Russian Orthodox church building is consecrated. 1696 Jesuit missionary François Pinet founds the mission of the Guardian Angel near what is today Chicago. The mission was abandoned in 1700 when missionary efforts seemed fruitless. 1697 to evangelize the English colonies. Thomas Bray, an Anglican preacher who made several missionary trips to North America, begins laying the groundwork for what will be the Society for the Propagation of the Gospel in Foreign Parts. 1698 Society for Promoting Christian Knowledge organized by Anglicans. 1699 Priests of the Quebec Seminary of Foreign Missions establish a mission among the Tamara Indians at Cahokia in what is now the state of Illinois. 1700 to 1799. 1700 After a Swedish missionary's sermon in Pennsylvania, one Native American posed such searching questions that the episode was reported in a 1731 history of the Swedish Church in America. The interchange is noted in Benjamin Franklin's remarks concerning the savages of North America. 1784. 1701 Society for the Propagation of the Gospel in Foreign Parts officially organized. 1702 George Keith returns to America as a missionary of the newly organized Society for the Propagation of the Gospel in Foreign Parts. 1703 The Society for the Propagation of the Gospel in Foreign Parts expands to the West Indies. 1704 French missionary priests arrive to evangelize the Chitimacha living along the Mississippi River in what is now the state of Louisiana. 1706 Bartholomew Siegenbalg, German missionary, arrives in Tranquebar. 1706 Irish-born Francis McKemmy, who has been an itinerant Presbyterian missionary among the colonists of America since 1683, is finally able to organize the first American presbytery. 1707 Italian Capuchin missionaries reach Kathmandu in Nepal. Maillard de Tournon makes public, in Nanjing, the Vatican decisions on rights, including the stipulations against the veneration of ancestors and of Confucius. 1708 Jesuit missionary Giovanni Battista Sidotti is arrested in Japan. He is taken to Edo, now called Tokyo, to be interrogated by R.I. Hakuseki. 1709 Experience Mayhew, missionary to the Martha's Vineyard Indians, translates the Psalms and the Gospel of John into the Massachusetts language. It will be a work considered second only to John Eliot's Indian Bible in terms of significant Indian language translations in colonial New England. 1710 First Modern Bible Society founded in Germany by Count Kanstein. 1711 Jesuit Eusebio Kino, missionary explorer in southern Arizona and northern Sonora, dies suddenly in northern Mexico. Kino, who has been called the cowboy missionary, had fought against the exploitation of Indians in Mexican silver mines. 1712 Using a press sent by the Society for Promoting Christian Knowledge, The Tranquebar mission in India begins printing books in the Portuguese language. 1713 Jesuit Hipólito Desideri goes to Tibet as a missionary. 1714 New Testament translated into Tamil. India. The Royal Danish College of Missions is organized in Copenhagen. 1715 Eastern Orthodox Church missionary outreach is renewed in Manchuria and northern China. 1718 The establishment of the Alamo Mission in San Antonio is authorized by the Viceroy of Mexico. The mission was to be an educational center for Native Americans who converted to Christianity. 1717 Chen Mao writes to the Chinese emperor about his concerns over Catholic missionaries and Western traders. He urgently requested an all-out prohibition of Catholic missionaries in the Qing provinces. 1718 Bartholomew Siegenbeld constructs a church building in India that is still in use today. 1719 Isaac Watts writes missionary hymn, Jesus Shall Reign Where'er the Sun. 1720 Missionary Johann Ernst Gruendler dies in India. He had arrived there in 1709 with the sponsorship of the Danish Mission Society. 1721 Mission San Juan Bautista Malabart in Baja California is abandoned due to the hostility of the Cochimi Indians, as well as to the decimation of the local population by epidemics and a water shortage. Chinese Kangxi Emperor bans Christian missionaries as a result of the Chinese rights controversy. Hans Ede goes to Greenland under the dual auspices of the Royal Mission College and the Bergen Company. 1723 Robert Miller publishes A History of the Propagation of Christianity and the Overthrow of Paganism, advocating prayer as the primary means of converting non-Christians. 1724 Yongzheng Emperor bans missionary activities outside the Beijing area. 1725 Knud Lim arrives as a missionary to the Sami people of Finnmark, Norwegian Arctic. 1726 John Wright, a Quaker missionary to the Native Americans, settles in southeastern Pennsylvania. 1728 Institutum Judaicum founded in Halle as first Protestant mission center for Jewish evangelism. 1729 Roman Catholic missionary Du Poisson becomes the first victim in the Natchez Revolt. On his way to New Orleans, he had been asked to stop and say Mass at the Natchez Post. He was killed in front of the altar. 1730 Lombard, French missionary, founds a Christian village with over 600 Indians at the mouth of Kourou River in French Guiana. A Jesuit, Lombard has been called the most successful of all missionaries in converting the Indians of French Guiana. 1731 A missionary movement is born when Count Nikolaus Ludwig Zinzendorf attends the coronation of King Christian VI of Denmark and witnesses two of Ager's Inuit converts. Over the next 2 years, his Moravian church at Herrnhutwil began its missionary outreach with work among the slaves in the Caribbean and the Inuit in Greenland. 1732 Alphonsus Liguori founds the Roman Catholic religious institute known as the Redemptorist Fathers with the purpose of doing missionary work among rural people. 1733 Moravians established the first mission in Greenland. 1734 A missionary convinces a Groton, Connecticut church to lend its building to the Mashantucket Pequot tribe for Christian worship services. 1735 John Wesley goes to Indians in Georgia as missionary with the Society for the Propagation of the Gospel in Foreign Parts. 1736 Anti-Christian edicts in China. Moravian missionaries at work among Nenets people of Archangelisk. 1737 Rev. Pugh, a missionary in Pennsylvania with the Society for the Propagation of the Gospel in Foreign Parts, begins ministering to blacks. He noted that the masters of the slaves were prejudiced against them becoming Christian. 1738 Moravian missionary George Schmidt settles in Bavaria-Kloof, Valley of the Baboons, in the Riviersonderend Valley of South Africa. He begins working with the Khoikhoi people, who were practically on the threshold of extinction. 1739 The first missionary to the Mohegan Indians, John Sargent, builds a home in Stockbridge, Massachusetts that is today a museum. 1740 Moravian David Zeisberger starts work among Creek people of Georgia. 1740 Johann Philipp Fabricius, missionary, arrives in South India. 1741 Dutch missionaries start building Christ Church building in Malacca town, Malaysia. It will take 12 years to complete. 1742 Moravian leader Count Zinzendorf visits Shecomeko, New York and baptizes 6 Indians. 1743 David Brainerd starts ministry to North American Indians. 1744 Thomas Thompson resigns his position as dean at the University of Cambridge to become a missionary. He was sent by the Society for the Propagation of the Gospel in Foreign Parts to New Jersey, taking a special interest in the slave population there. He would later request to begin mission work in Africa. In 1751, Thompson would become the first S.P.G. missionary to the Gold Coast, modern-day Ghana. 1745 David Brainerd, after preaching to Native Americans in December, wrote about the response. They soon came in, one after another, with tears in their eyes, to know what they should do to be saved. It was an amazing season of power among them, and seemed as if God had bowed the heavens and come down, and that God was about to convert the whole world. Quote, 1746 From Boston a call is issued to the Christians of the New World to enter into a 7-year concert of prayer for missionary work. 1747 Jonathan Edwards appeals for prayer for world missions. 1748 Roman Catholic Pedro Sanz and 4 other missionaries are executed, together with 14 Chinese Christians. Prior to his death, Sanz reportedly converted some of his prison guards to Christianity. 1749 Spanish Franciscan priest Junipero Serra, 1713–1784 arrives in Mexico as a missionary. In 1767 he would go north to what is now California, zealously building missions and converting Native Americans. 1750 Jonathan Edwards, preacher of the First Great Awakening, having been banished from his church at Northampton, Massachusetts, goes as a missionary to the nearby Housatonic Indians. Christian Frederick Schwartz goes to India with Danish Halle Mission. 1751 Samuel Cook arrives in New Jersey as a missionary for the SPGFP. 1752 Thomas Thompson, first Anglican missionary to Africa, arrives in the Gold Coast, now Ghana. 1753 The disappearance of Erhardt and 6 companions leads to temporary abandonment of Moravian missionary initiatives in Labrador. 1754 Moravian John Etwine arrives in America from Germany as a missionary, preaching to Native Americans and establishing missions. Etwine will travel as far south as Georgia. 1755 The Mohican Indian settlement at Gnardenhutten, PA, is attacked and destroyed. Moravian missionary Johann Jacob Schmick remains with the Mohicans through exile and captivity. Despite almost constant threats from white neighbors, Schmick will join his Indian congregation as they seek refuge in Bethlehem, follow them as captives to Philadelphia, and remain with them after they settle in Wyalusing, Pennsylvania. 1756 Civil unrest forces Gideon Halley away from his missionary work among the Six Nations on the Susquehanna River, where he has been working for 4 years under the supervision of Jonathan Edwards with an appointment from the Society for Propagating the Gospel Among the Indians. 1757 Lutherans begin ministering to blacks in the Caribbean. 1758 John Wesley baptizes 2 slaves, thus breaking the skin color barrier for Methodist societies. 1759 Native American Samson Occom, direct descendant of the great Mohican chief Uncas, is ordained by the Presbyterians. Occom became the first American Indian to publish works in English. These included sermons, hymns and a short autobiography. 1760 Adam Volker and Christian Butler arrive in Tranquebar as the first Moravian missionaries to India. 1760 Methodists first reach the West Indies. 1761 The first Moravian missionary in Ohio, Frederick Post, settles on the north side of the Muskingum. 1762 Moravian missionary John Heckewelder confers with Cock the Gacton, White Eyes, at the mouth of the Beaver River, Pennsylvania. 1763 The Presbyterian Synod of New York orders that a collection for missions be taken. In 1767, the Synod asks that this collection be done annually. 1764 The Moravians make a decision to expand and begin publicizing their missionary activity, particularly in the British colonies. Moravian Jens Haven makes the first of 3 exploratory missionary journeys to Greenland. 1765 Suriname Governor-General Crommelin convinces 3 Moravian missionaries to work near the headwaters of the Gran Rio. They settle among the Saramaka near the Cynthia Creek in Gran Manabini's village, where they are received with mixed feelings. 1766 Philip Quack, a Fetu youth from the Cape Coast area of Ghana who spent 12 years studying in England, returns to Africa, supported as a missionary by the Society for the Propagation of the Gospel in Foreign Parts. Quack is first non-European ordained priest in the Church of England. 1767 Spain expels the Jesuits from Spanish colonies in the New World. 1768 5 United Brethren missionaries from Germany, invited by the Danish Guinea Company, arrive in the Gold Coast, now Ghana, to teach in the Cape Coast Castle schools. 1769 Junipero Serra founds Mission San Diego de Alcala, first of the 21 Alta California missions. 1770 John Marrant, a free black from New York City, begins ministering cross-culturally, preaching to the American Indians. By 1775 he had carried the gospel to the Cherokee and Creek Indians as well as to groups he called the Catawba and Hosaw peoples. 1771 Methodist Francis Asbury arrives in America. David Avery is ordained as missionary to the Oneida tribe. 1772 After visiting Silly Cove in Newfoundland, Canada, missionary James Balfour describes it as a most barbarous, lawless place. 1773 Pope Clement XIV dissolves the Jesuit order. 2 Dominican order missionaries beheaded in Vietnam. 1775 John Crook is sent by Liverpool Methodists to the Isle of Man. 1776 Cyril Vasilyevich Suchanov builds first church among Evenks of Transbaikal, or Doria, in Siberia. The first baptism of an Eskimo by a Lutheran pastor takes place in Labrador. 1777 Portuguese missionaries build a church at Hashnabad, Bangladesh. 1778 Theodore Sladich is martyred while doing missionary work to counter Islamic influence in the Western Balkans. 1780 August Gottlieb Spangenberg writes an account of the manner in which the Protestant Church of the Unitas Fratrum, or United Brethren, preach the gospel and carry on their missions among the heathen. Originally written in German, the book will be translated into English in 1788. 1781 In the midst of the American Revolutionary War, The British so feared Moravian missionary David Zeisberger and his influence among the Lenape, also called Delaware, and other Native Americans that they arrested him and his assistant, John Heckewelder, charging them with treason. 1782 freed slave George Liele goes to Jamaica as missionary. 1783 Moses Baker and George Gibbons, both former slaves, leave the U.S. to become missionaries in the West Indies. 1784 Thomas Coke, Methodist, submits his plan for the Society for the Establishment of Missions Among the Heathen. Methodist missions among the heathen will begin in 1786 when Coke, destined for Nova Scotia, is driven off course by a storm and lands at Antigua in the British West Indies. 1785 Joseph White's sermon titled, On the Duty of Attempting the Propagation of the Gospel Among Our Mahometan and Gentoo Subjects in India, is published in the second edition of his book Sermons, containing a view of Christianity and Mahometanism in their history, their evidence, and their effects. The sermon was first preached at the University of Oxford. 1786 John Marrant, a free black from New York City, writes in his journal that he preached to a great number of Indians and white people at Greens Harbor, Newfoundland. Marrant's cross-cultural ministry led him to take the gospel to the Cherokee, Creek, Catawba, he called them the Catawba, and Hosaw Indians. 1787 William Carey is ordained in England by the Particular Baptists and soon begins to urge that worldwide missions be undertaken. 1788 Dutch missionaries began preaching the gospel among fishermen in Bangladesh. 1789 The Jesuits established Georgetown University as the first U.S. Catholic college. 1790 Prince Williams, a freed slave from South Carolina, goes to Nassau, Bahamas, where he will start Bethel Meeting House. 1791 120 Korean Christians are tortured and killed for their faith. It began when Paul Yun-ji Chung, a noble who had become a Christian, decided not to bury his mother according to traditional Confucian custom. 1792 William Carey writes an inquiry into the obligations of Christians to use means for the conversion of the heathen and forms the Baptist Missionary Society to support him in establishing missionary work in India. 1793 Stephen Baden ordained in U.S. Although much of Baden's ministry was pastoral work among his own countrymen, he did some outreach among the Potawatomi Indians. 1794 8 Russian Orthodox missionaries arrive on Kodiak Island in Alaska. Within a few months several thousand people have been baptized. 1795 The London Missionary Society is formed to send missionaries to Tahiti. 1796 Scottish and Glasgow Missionary Societies established. In India, Johann Philip Fabricius's translation of the Bible into Tamil is revised and published. 1797 Netherlands Missionary Society formed. The Duff, carrying 36 lay and pastoral missionaries, sails to 3 islands of the South Pacific. The first Christian missionary from the London Missionary Society visits Heaver on the Pacific island of Tahuata. He is not well received. 1798 The Missionary Society of Connecticut is organized by the Congregationalists to take the gospel to the heathen lands of Vermont and Ohio. Its missionaries evangelize both European settlers and Native Americans. 1799 The Church Missionary Society is formed by the Clapham sect in South London, England. John van de Kemp, Dutch physician, goes to Cape Colony, Africa. 1800 to 1849. 1800 New York Missionary Society formed. Johann Janik founds a school in Berlin to train young people for missionary service. 1801 John Theodosius van der Kemp moves to Graaf Reinet to minister to the Khoi Hottentots people. Earlier he had helped found the Netherlands Missionary Society. In 1798, he had gone to South Africa to work as a missionary among the Xhosa. 1802 Henry Martin hears Charles Simeon speak of William Carey's work in India and resolves to become a missionary himself. He will sail for India in 1805. 1803 The Massachusetts Baptist Missionary Society votes to publish a missionary magazine, now known as the American Baptist. The periodical is the oldest religious magazine in the U.S. 1804 British and Foreign Bible Society formed. Church Missionary Society enters Sierra Leone, sending 4 German Lutherans. 1805 The first Christian missionaries arrive in Namibia. Brothers Abraham and Christian Albrecht from the London Missionary Society. 1806 Haystack Prayer Meeting at Williams College, Andover Theological Seminary founded as a missionary training center. Protestant missionary work begins in earnest across southern Africa. 1807 Robert Morrison of the London Missionary Society established a mission in Guangzhou, Canton, in China. 1809 The Church's ministry among Jewish people is established by Joseph Frey, William Wilberforce, and Louis Way. 1810 The American Board of Commissioners for Foreign Missions, ABCFM, is established. 1811 English Wesleyans enter Sierra Leone. 1812 First ABCFM foreign missionaries, Adoniram Judson and Luther Rice, arrive in Serampore, with Judson soon going to Burma. 1813 The Methodists form the Wesleyan Missionary Society. 1814 First recorded baptism of a mainland Chinese Protestant convert, Kai Gao. American Baptist Foreign Mission Society formed. Netherlands Bible Society founded. Samuel Marsden officiated at the first service on Christmas Day to begin the Church Missionary Society work in New Zealand. 1815 American Board of Commissioners for Foreign Missions open work on Ceylon, modern-day Sri Lanka through American Ceylon Mission. Basel Missionary Society organized. Richmond African Missionary Society founded. 1816 Robert Moffat arrives in Africa. American Bible Society founded. Charlotte White, a Baptist, arrives in India, the first single American woman to become a missionary. 1816 Barnabas Shaw opens the first Wesleyan mission in South Africa. Lily Fontaine, in the Kamiesberg Mountains, Namaqualand, among the Khoisan peoples in the Northern Cape Colony. 1817 James Thompson, agent for British and Foreign Bible Society, begins distributing Bibles throughout Latin America. 1818 Missionary work begins in Madagascar with the reluctant approval of the king. 1819 John Scudder, senior missionary physician, joins the American Ceylon Mission. Wesleyan Methodists start work in Madras, India. Reginald Heber writes words to missionary classic from Greenland's icy mountains. 1820 Hiram Bingham goes to Hawaii, Sandwich Islands. 1821 African-American Locke Carey, a Baptist missionary, sails with 28 colleagues from Norfolk, VA to Sierra Leone. Protestant Episcopal Church Mission Board established. 1822 African-American Betsy Stockton is sent by the American Board of Missions to Hawaii. She thus becomes the first single-woman missionary appointed by the American Board. 1823 Scottish Missionary Society workers arrive in Bombay, India. Liang Fa, first Chinese Protestant evangelist, is ordained by Robert Morrison. Colonial and Continental Church Society formed. 1824 Berlin Mission Society formed. 1825 George Boardman goes to Burma. 1826 American Bible Society sends first shipment of Bibles to Mexico. 1827 Missionary Lancelot Edward Threlkeld reports in the Monitor that he was advancing rapidly in his efforts to disseminate Holy Scripture among indigenous Australians of the Hunter and Shoalhaven rivers. 1828 Basel Mission begins work in the Christiansborg area of Accra, Ghana. Karl Gutslav of the Netherlands Missionary Society lands in Bangkok, Thailand. Rhenish Missionary Society formed. 1829 George Muller, a native of Prussia, goes to England as a missionary to the Jews. Anthony Norris Groves, an Exeter dentist, sets off as a missionary to Baghdad accompanied by John Kitto. 1830 Church of Scotland missionary Alexander Duff arrives in Kolkata, formerly Calcutta. William Swan, missionary to Siberia, writes letters on missions. The first Protestant comprehensive treatment of the theory and practice of missions. Baptism of Talfa Hautupo, King of Tonga, by a Western missionary. Arrival of John Williams of the London Missionary Society in Samoa. Landing in Sapapali on Savary Island. 1831 American Congregational missionaries arrive in Thailand, withdrawing in 1849 without a single convert. 4 Native Americans from beyond the Rocky Mountains come east to St. Louis, Missouri seeking information on the Palefaces religion. 1832 Tiva, former cannibal and pioneer Pacific Islander missionary, is commissioned by John Williams to work on the Samoan island of Manono. 1833 Baptist work in Thailand begins with John Taylor Jones, the first American Methodist missionary. Melville Cox goes to Liberia where he dies within 4 months. His dying appeal was, "Let 1,000 fall before Africa be given up." Free Will Baptist Foreign Missionary Society begins work in India. 1834 American Presbyterian Mission opens work in India in the Punjab. Peter Parker M.D., associated with the American Board of Commissioners for Foreign Missions. First American medical missionary to China opens Ophthalmic Hospital at Canton. 1835 Rhenish Missionary Society begins work among the Dayaks on Borneo, Indonesia. Daniel Wilson, Bishop of Calcutta, calls India's caste system a cancer. Quote, 1836 Plymouth Brethren begin work in Madras, India. George Muller begins his work with orphans in Bristol, England. Gosner Mission formed. Leipzig Mission Society established. Colonial Missionary Society formed. The Providence Missionary Baptist District Association is formed, one of at least 6 national organizations among African American Baptists whose sole objective was missionary work in Africa. 1837 Evangelical Lutheran Church Mission Board established. First translation of Bible into Japanese. Actual translation work done in Singapore. 1838 Church of Scotland Mission of Inquiry to the Jews. 4 Scottish ministers including Robert Murray McChaney and Andrew Bonar journey to Palestine. Augustinians enter Australia. 1839 Entire Bible is published in language of Tahiti. 3 French missionaries martyred in Korea. English Protestant missionaries, including John Williams, murdered on Erromango, Vanuatu, South Pacific. 1840 David Livingstone is in present-day Malawi, Africa, with the London Missionary Society. American Presbyterians enter Thailand and labor for 18 years before seeing their first Thai convert. Irish Presbyterian Missionary Society formed. Welsh Calvinistic Methodist Missionary Society founded. 1841 Edinburgh Medical Missionary Society formed. Welsh Methodists begin working among the Kazee people of India. 1842 Methodist missionary Thomas Birch Freeman arrives in Badagry, Nigeria. 1842 Church Missionary Society enters Badagry. Lagos. 1842 Gosner Mission Society receives royal sanction. Norwegian Missionary Society formed in Stavanger. 1842 Christian mission to the Jews. CMJ. Establishes Christ Church, First Anglican Church in the Old City of Jerusalem. 1843 Baptist John Taylor Jones translates New Testament into the Thai language. British Society for the Propagation of the Gospel among the Jews formed. 1844 German Johann Krapf of the Church Missionary Society begins work in Mombasa on the Kenya coast. First Young Men's Christian Association, YMCA, formed by George Williams, George Smith and Thomas McClatchy sail for China as the first two CMS missionaries to that country. 1844 Hans Paludan Smith Schroeder, missionary, arrives in Port Natal, South Africa. 1845 Southern Baptist Convention Mission Organization founded. 1846 The London Missionary Society establishes work on Niue, a South Pacific island which Westerners had named the Savage Island. 1847 Protestant Rhenish Missionary Society begins operations in China. 1847 Presbyterian William Burns goes to China, translates the Pilgrim's Progress into Chinese. Moses White sails to China as a Methodist medical missionary. 1847 John Christian Frederick Heyer, missionary, arrives in Andhra Pradesh, India. 1848 Charles Foreman goes to Punjab. Johannes Riebmann, German missionary with the Church Missionary Society, arrive at Mount Kilimanjaro. Initially, the story of a snow-covered peak near the equator was scoffed at. 1849 Johann Krapf of the Church Missionary Society was the first European to reach Mount Kenya. Just weeks after arriving on the Melanesian island of Anatum, missionary John Geddy wrote in his journal, "In the darkness, degradation, pollution and misery that surrounds me, I will look forward in the vision of faith to the time when some of these poor islanders will unite in the triumphant song of ransomed souls, unto him that loved us, and washed us from our sins in his own blood." 1852–1899. 1850 On the occasion of Karl Gutzlaff's visit to Europe, the Berlin Ladies' Association for China is established in conjunction with the Berlin Missionary Association for China. Work in China will commence in 1851 with the arrival of Herman D. Newman in Hong Kong. Rev. Thomas Valpy French came to India in 1850, founded St. John's College, Agra, and became first Bishop of Lahore in 1877. 1851 Allen Gardner and 6 missionary colleagues die of exposure and starvation at Patagonia on the southern tip of South America because a resupply ship from England arrives 6 months late. 1852 Zenana, Women, and Medical Missionary Fellowship formed in England to send out single women missionaries. 1853 The Hermannsburg Missionary Society, founded in 1849 by Lewis Harms, has finished training its first group of young missionaries. They are sent to Africa on a ship, the Candice, which had been built using money entirely from donations. 1854 New York Missionary Conference, guided by Alexander Duff, ponders the question, to what extent are we authorized by the Word of God to expect the conversion of the world to Christ? Quote, Henry Venn, Secretary of the Church Missionary Society, sets out an ideal of self-governing, self-supporting and self-propagating churches. Hudson Taylor arrives in China. 1855 Henry Steinhauer is ordained as a Canadian Methodist missionary to North American Indians, and posted to Lac La Biche, Alberta. Steinhauer's missionary work had actually begun 15 years earlier in 1840 when he was assigned to lack la pluie to assist in translating, teaching and interpreting the Ojibwa and Cree languages. 1856 Presbyterians start work in Columbia with the arrival of Henry Pratt. 1857 Bible translated into Swana language. Board of Foreign Missions of Dutch Reformed Church set up. 4 missionary couples killed at the Fatagar Mission during the Indian Mutiny of 1857. Publication of David Livingstone's book Missionary Travels and Researches in South Africa. 1858 John G. Paton begins work in New Hebrides. Basel Evangelical Missionary Society begins work in Western Sumatra, Indonesia. 1859 Presbyterian minister Rev. Ashbel Green Simonton arrives in Rio de Janeiro. 1859 Protestant missionaries arrive in Japan. Revivals in North America and the British Isles generate interest in overseas missions. Albert Benjamin Simpson, founder of Christian and Missionary Alliance, is converted by the revival ministry of Henry Grattan Guinness. 1861 Protestant Stundism arises in the village of Osnova of modern-day Ukraine. Sarah Doremus founds the Women's Union Missionary Society. Episcopal Church opens work in Haiti. Rhenish Mission goes to Indonesia under Ludwig Nommensen. 1862 Paris Evangelical Missionary Society opens work in Senegal. The first dictionary of the Samoan language published. Written by Rev. George Pratt of the London Missionary Society. 1863 Robert Moffat, missionary to Africa with the London Missionary Society, publishes his book Rivers of Water in a Dry Place, being an account of the introduction of Christianity into South Africa, and of Mr. Moffat's missionary labors. 1865 The China Inland Mission is founded by James Hudson Taylor. James Laidlaw Maxwell plants first viable church in Taiwan. Salvation Army founded in London by William Booth. Van Dyke Bible, in Arabic, completed. 1865 Ernst Faber arrives in China. 1865 Henry Venn, 1796–1873, of the Church Missionary Society called for 3 self-native churches: self-supporting, self-governing, and self-propagating. 1866 Charles Haddon Spurgeon invents the wordless book, which is widely used in cross-cultural evangelism. Theodore Jonas Mayer, 1819–1894, a converted Jew serving as a Presbyterian missionary in Italy, nurses those dying in a cholera epidemic until he himself falls prey to the disease. Barely surviving, he becomes a peacemaker between Catholics and Protestants. Robert Thomas, known as the first Protestant martyr in Korea, is beaten to death by locals after getting involved in kidnapping, shooting and killing locals in Pyongyang, Korea. 1867 Methodists start work in Argentina. Scripture Union established. Lars Olsen Skrærud and Hans-Peter Borasin begin working among the Santals of India. 1868 Robert Bruce goes to Iran. Canadian Baptist missionary Americus Timpany begins work among the Telugu people in India. 1869 The first Methodist women's missionary magazine, The Heathen Women's Friend, begins publication. Riot in Yangzhou, China destroys China Inland Mission House and nearly leads to open war between Britain and China. 1870 Clara Swain, the very first female missionary medical doctor, arrives at Bareilly, India. Orthodox Missionary Society founded. 1871 William Sloane went to Faroe Islands commended from a Brethren assembly. 1871 Henry Stanley finds David Livingstone in Central Africa. 1872 First All India Missionary Conference with 136 participants. George Leslie Mackay plants church in northern Taiwan. Lottie Moon appointed as missionary to China. 1873 Regions Beyond Missionary Union founded in London in connection with the East London Training Institute for Home and Foreign Missions. First scripture portion. Gospel of Luke. Translated into Pangasinan, a language of the Philippines, by Alfonso Lalave. 1874 Gustav Warneck founded the Allgemeine Missionszeitschrift in Gütersloh, Germany, the first scientific missionary periodical. Lord Radstock's first visit to St. Petersburg, Russia, and the beginning of an evangelical awakening among the St. Petersburg nobility. Albert Sturgis initiates the Interior Micronesia mission in the Mortlock Islands under the leadership of Micronesian students from Owa. 1875 The Foreign Christian Missionary Society organized within the Christian Church, Disciples of Christ, and Church of Christ movements. Clark, a Canadian Indian convert, brought Christianity to natives at Ft. Wrangell, Alaska. He assumed the name of Philip Mackay. 1876 In September, a rusty ocean steamer arrives at a port on the Calabar River in what is now Nigeria. That part of Africa was then known as the White Man's Grave. The only woman on board that ship is 29-year-old Mary Slessor, a missionary. 1877 James Chalmers goes to New Guinea. Presbyterians Sheldon Jackson and missionary widow Amanda McFarland arrive at Ft. Wrangell, Alaska, where they join Philip Mackay, née Clark, to start missionary work. McFarland was the first white woman in Alaska, and renowned as Alaska's courageous missionary. Quote, 1878 Mass movement to Christ begins in Ongole, India. 1880 woman missionary Dr. Fanny Butler goes to India. Missionary periodical The Gospel in All Lands is launched by A. B. Simpson. Eustace Henry Nelson and Fanny Bishop Carpen Nelson begin 45 years of service in Belém, Pará, Brazil, establishing the first Protestant church in Amazonia in 1883. 1880 conversion of Shishengmo. 1836 to 1896. A brilliant Confucian philosopher who, after being freed opium, dedicated his life to preaching the gospel and creating of rehabilitation centers for thousands of opium addicts in the Chinese province of Shanxi and other cities and towns such as Chaocheng, Teng Tsun, Hochao, Taiyuan and Pingyang, along with his wife. In 1906, there were, in all, 45 rehabilitation centers and 300,000 healed. 1881 Methodist work in Lahore, Pakistan starts in the wake of revivals under Bishop William Taylor. North Africa Mission, now Arab World Ministries, founded on work of Edward Glennie in Algeria. 1881 Home and Foreign Mission Fund, now known as Interlink, was established in Glasgow as a missionary service group for Brethren missionaries from Scotland. 1882 James Gilmore, London Missionary Society missionary to Mongolia, goes home to England for a furlough. During that time he published a book, Among the Mongols. It was so well written that one critic wrote, Robinson Crusoe has turned missionary, lived years in Mongolia, and wrote a book about it. Concerning the author, the critic said, if ever on earth there lived a man who kept the law of Christ, and could give proof of it, and be absolutely unconscious that he was giving it to them, it is this man whom the Mongols called our Gilmore. Single quote, quote. 1883 Salvation Army enters West Pakistan. A. B. Simpson organizes the Missionary Union for the evangelization of the world. The first classes of the Missionary Training College are held in New York City. Zaire Christian and Missionary Alliance mission field opens. 1884 David Torrance is sent by the Jewish Mission of the Free Church of Scotland as a medical missionary to Palestine. 1884 Alice Hyson is sent by Mrs. F. E. H. Haynes, and the Women's Home Missionary Society of the Presbyterian Church, Taos, New Mexico. 1885 Horace Grant Underwood, Presbyterian missionary, and Henry Appenzeller, Methodist missionary, arrive in Korea. Scottish Iron Keith Falconer goes to Aden on the Arabian Peninsula. Cambridge 7, C. T. Studd, M. Beecham, W. W. Castles, D. E. Host, S. P. Smith, A. T. Pothill Turner, C. H. Polhill Turner, go to China as missionaries with the China Inland Mission. 1886 Student volunteer movement launched as 100 university and seminary students at Moody's Conference Grounds at Mount Herman, Massachusetts, sign the Princeton Pledge, which says, "I purpose, God willing, to become a foreign missionary." Quote, 1886 Johann Fleal, missionary, arrives in New Guinea. 1887 The 100 missionaries deployed in 1 year in China under the China Inland Mission. Dr. William Cassidy, a Toronto medical doctor, was ordained as the Christian and Missionary Alliance's first missionary preacher. Unfortunately, en route to China, he died of smallpox. However, Cassidy's death has been called the spark that ignited the Alliance missionary blaze. Quote, 1888 Jonathan Goforth sails to China. Student volunteer movement for foreign missions officially organized with John R. Mott as chairman and Robert Wilder as traveling secretary. The movement's motto, coined by Wilder, was, "The evangelization of the world in this generation." Scripture Gift Mission, now Life Words, founded. 1889 missionary linguist and folklorist Paul Olaf Bodding arrives in India, Santhal Parganas, and continues the work among the Santals started by Scraywood and Barason in 1867. North Africa Mission enters Tripoli as first Protestant mission in Libya. 1890 Central American Mission founded by C. I. Schofield, editor of the Schofield Reference Bible. Methodist Charles Gabriel writes missionary song, "Send the Light." John Livingston Nevius of China visits Korea to outline his strategy for missions. 1. Each believer should be a productive member of society and active in sharing his faith. 2. The church in Korea should be distinctly Korean and free of foreign control. 3. The leaders of the Korean church will be selected and trained from its members. 4. Church buildings will be built by Koreans with their own resources. Frederick Franson founds the Scandinavian Alliance Mission in Chicago, later known as the Evangelical Alliance Mission. 1891 Samuel Zwemer goes to Basra in southern Iraq, having founded the Arabian Mission in 1890. Helen Chapman sails for the Congo, Zaire. She married a Danish missionary, William Rasmussen, whom she met during the voyage. 1892 Redcliffe College, Centre for Mission Training founded in Chelsea, London. 1892 Open Air Campaigners was founded in Sydney, Australia as Koji Open Air Mission. 1893 Eleanor Chestnut goes to China as Presbyterian medical missionary. Sudan Interior Mission founded by Roland Bingham, a graduate of Nyack College. 1894 Sowatanana revival begins among Lutheran and LMS churches in Madagascar, lasting 80 years. 1895 Africa Inland Mission formed by Peter Cameron Scott. Japan Bible Society established. Roland Allen sent as missionary for the Society for the Propagation of the Gospel in Foreign Parts. To its North China Mission. Amy Carmichael arrives in India. 1896 Odin Schultz founds the first Hungarian Lutheran foreign mission periodical Kolmissio. 1897 Presbyterian Church, USA, begins work in Venezuela. 1898 – Teresa Huntington leaves her New England home for the Middle East. For 7 years she will work as an American board missionary in Elazig, Carpet, in the Ottoman Empire. Her letters home will be published in a book titled Great Need Over the Water. Archibald Reekie of the Canadian Baptist Ministries arrives in Aurora as the first Protestant missionary to Bolivia. The work of Canadian Baptists led to the guarantee of freedom of religion in Bolivia in 1905. 1899 – James Rogers arrives in Philippines with the Presbyterian Mission. Central American Mission enters Guatemala. 1900 to 1949. 1900 – American Friends open work in Cuba. Ecumenical Missionary Conference in Carnegie Hall, New York. 162 mission boards represented. 189 missionaries and their children killed in Boxer Rebellion in China. South African Andrew Murray writes The Key to the Missionary Problem, in which he challenges the Church to hold weeks of prayer for the world. 1901 – Nazarene John Diaz goes to Cape Verde Islands. Maud Carey sails for Morocco. Oriental Missionary Society founded by Charles Cowman. His wife is the compiler of popular devotional book Streams in the Desert. Missionary James Chalmers killed and eaten by cannibals in Papua New Guinea. 1902 to 1927, with world attention focused on the anti-Western Boxer Rebellion. American Protestants made missions to China a high priority. They supported 500 missionaries in 1890, more than 2,000 in 1914, and 8,300 in 1920. By 1927 they opened 16 American universities in China, 6 medical schools, and 4 theology schools, together with 265 middle schools and a large number of elementary schools. The number of converts was not large, but the educational influence was dramatic. 1902 Swiss members of the Plymouth Brethren enter Laos. 1902 California Yearly Meeting of Friends opens work in Guatemala. 1903 Church of the Nazarene enters Mexico. 1903 First group baptism at Saddleberg Mission Station under Christian Kaiser in New Guinea paves way for mass conversions during the following years. 1904 Premillennialist theologian William Eugene Blackstone begins teaching that the world has already been evangelized, citing Acts 2, 5, 8, 4, Mark 16, 20 and Colossians chapter 1, 23. 1904 European Christian Mission was founded in Estonia by J. P. Rad. Today it is known as European Christian Mission International. 1905 Gunnarius Tollefson is converted at a Salvation Army meeting under the preaching of Samuel Logan Brengel. Later he would become a missionary to the Belgian Congo and then first mission secretary of the Norwegian Pentecostal movement. 1905 Sadhu Sundar Singh, an Indian missionary, former adherent of Sikhism, begins his ministry as Sadhu preaching in northern India and Tibet. From 1918 to 1922, he travels to preach throughout the world, but finishes his career in new missions to Tibet. 1906 The Evangelical Alliance Mission Team opens work in Venezuela with T. J. Bach and John Christensen. 1907 Massive revival meetings in Korea. Harmon Schmelzenbach sails for Africa. Presbyterians and Methodists open Union Theological Seminary in Manila, Philippines. Bolivian Indian Mission founded by George Allen. 1908 Gospel Missionary Union opens work in Colombia with Charles Chapman and John Funk. Pentecostal movement enters Rome and southern Italy as well as Egypt. 1909 Pentecostal movement reaches Chile through ministry of American Methodist Willis Hoover. 1910 Edinburgh Missionary Conference held in Scotland. presided over by John Mott. Beginning modern Protestant ecumenical cooperation in missions. 1911 Christian and Missionary Alliance enters Cambodia and Vietnam. 1912 Conference of British Missionary Societies formed. International Review of Missions begins publication. 1913 C.T. Studd establishes Heart of Africa Mission, now called WEC International. African-American Eliza Davis George sails from New York for Liberia. William Whiting Borden dies in Egypt while preparing to take the gospel to the Muslims in China. 1914 to 1918 World War I. Numerous missionaries in Africa and Asia in British, French, German and Belgian colonies are expelled or detained for the duration of the war, if their nation was at war with the colonial authority. 1914 to 1918 The World War reduced the enthusiasm for missions and led to growing doubts about the wisdom of cultural imperialism in dealing with foreign peoples. 1914 Large-scale revival movement in Uganda. C.T. Studd reports a revival movement in the Congo. 1914 Paul Olaf Bodding completes his translation of the Bible into the Santali language. 1915 Founded in 1913 in Nanjing, China as a women's Christian college. Jinling College officially opens with 8 students and 6 teachers. It was supported by 4 missions: the Northern Baptists, the Christian Church, Disciples of Christ, the Methodists, and the Presbyterians. 1916 Rhenish missionaries are forced to leave Ungiva in southern Angola under pressure from the Portuguese authorities and chief Mandum of the Kwanyama. By then, 4 congregations existed with a confessing membership of 800. 1917 Interdenominational Foreign Mission Association, IFMA, founded. 1919 The Union version of Bible in Chinese is published. Gospel Missionary Union enters Sudan and Mali. 1920 Baptist Mid-Missions formed by William Haas. Church of the Nazarene enters Syria. Columbans enter Australia and New Zealand. 1921 Founding of International Missionary Council, IMC. Norwegian Mission Council formed. Columbans enter China. 1922 Nazarenes enter Mozambique. 1923 Scottish missionaries begin work in British Togoland. 1924 Bible Churchmen's Missionary Society opens work in Upper Burma. Baptist Mid-Missions begins work in Venezuela. 1925 E. Stanley Jones, Methodist missionary to India, writes The Christ of the Indian Road. 1926 Charles J. MacDonald, a Southern Baptist layman, started work in the town of Wahiawa, Territory of Hawaii, with a Sunday school which eventually became the First Baptist Church of Wahiawa. 1927 Nalau Tomsong translates the Bible into Thadu Kuki language. East African Revival Movement. Balakole emerges in Rwanda and moves across several other countries. 1928 Cuba Bible Institute. West Indies Mission opens. Jerusalem Conference of International Missionary Council. Foundation of Borneo Evangelical Mission by Hudson Southall, Frank Davidson and Carey Tolley. 1929 Christian and Missionary Alliance enters East Borneo, Indonesia, and Thailand. 1930 Christian and Missionary Alliance starts work among Bali tribe in the Ivory Coast. 1931 Franciscan missionary the Venerable Gabriel Allegra arrives in Hunan, China from Italy to start translating the Bible. 1931 HCJB radio station started in Quito, Ecuador by Clarence Jones. Baptist Mid-Missions enters Liberia. 1932 Assemblies of God open mission work in Colombia. Layman's Missionary Inquiry Report published. 1933 Gladys Aylward, subject of movie The Inn of the Sixth Happiness, arrives in China. Columbans enter Korea. 1934 – William Cameron Townsend begins the Summer Institute of Linguistics. Columbans enter Japan. 1935 – Frank C. Laubach, American missionary to the Philippines, perfects the Each One Teach One literacy program, which has been used worldwide to teach 60 million people to read. 1936 – With the outbreak of civil war in Spain, missionaries are forced to leave that country. 1937 – After expulsion of missionaries from Ethiopia by Italian invaders, widespread revival erupts among Protestant churches in South. Child Evangelism Fellowship founded by Jesse Irvin Overholzer. 1938 – Madras World Missionary Conference held. Dutch missiologist Hendrik Kremer publishes his seminal work The Christian Message in a Non-Christian World. West Indies mission enters Dominican Republic. Church Missionary Society forced out of Egypt. Dr. Arthur Spiker completes construction of Reynolds Memorial Hospital in central India. 1939–1945 World War II Numerous missionaries in Africa and Asia in British, French and Belgian colonies are expelled or detained for the duration of the war, if their nation was at war with the colonial authority. 1939 ASIC missionary Joy Ridderhoff makes a recording of gospel songs and a message and sends it into the mountains of Honduras. It is the beginning of gospel recordings. 1940 Mariana Slocum begins translation work in Mexico. Military police in Japan arrest the executive officers of the Salvation Army. 1942 William Cameron Townsend founds Wycliffe Bible Translators, New Tribes Mission founded with a vision to reach the tribal peoples of Bolivia. 1943 5 missionaries with New Tribes Mission martyred. 11 American Baptist missionaries beheaded in the Philippines by Japanese soldiers. 1944 missionaries returned to Suki, Papua New Guinea after withdrawal of the Japanese military. 1945 Mission Aviation Fellowship formed. Far East Broadcasting Company, FEBC, founded. Evangelical Foreign Missions Association formed by denominational mission boards. K.S. Latourette completes his 7-volume set A History of the Expansion of Christianity. 1945 The Venerable Gabriel Allegra establishes the Studium Biblicum Franciscanum in Beijing. 1946 First InterVarsity Missionary Convention, now called Urbana, United Bible Societies formed. 1947 Whitby World Missionary Conference in Canada. Conservative Baptist Foreign Mission Society begins work among the Senufo people in the Ivory Coast. 1948 Alfredo del Rosso merges his Italian Holiness mission with the Church of the Nazarene, thus opening Nazarene work on the European continent. Southern Baptist Convention adopts program calling for the tripling of the number of missionaries. 1949 Southern Baptist Mission Board opens work in Venezuela. Mary Tripp sent out by CEF Child Evangelism Fellowship to the Netherlands. 1950–1999 1950 Paul Oyala arrives in Haiti. Radio station for VEH, owned by East and West Indies Bible Mission, starts broadcasting from near Cap Haitien, Haiti. 1951 Communist government of China expels all Christian missionaries. The void was more than filled by a Chinese church, 25% of which consisted of independent churches. 1951 World Evangelical Alliance organized. Bill and Vonette Bright create Campus Crusade for Christ at UCLA. Alaska Missions is founded, later to be renamed Interact Ministries. 1952 Willingen World Missionary Conference in Germany. Transworld Radio founded. 1953 Walter Trubbish, who would publish I Loved a Girl in 1962, begins pioneer missionary work in northern Cameroon. 1954 Mennonite Board of Missions and Charities opens work in Cuba. Argentina revival breaks out during Tommy Hicks Crusade. Augustinians re-established in Japan. Columbans enter Chile. 1955 Donald McGavran publishes Bridges of God. Dutch missionary, Brother Andrew, makes first of many Bible smuggling trips into communist Eastern Europe. 1956 U.S. missionaries Jim Elliot, Pete Fleming, Edward McCully, Nate Saint, and Roger Udarian are killed by Waorani Indians in eastern Ecuador. See Operation AUCA. 1957 East Asia Christian Conference. EACC. Founded at Prapat, Sumatra, Indonesia. 1958 Rotunga Pudite completes translation of Bible into Hmar language. India, and was appointed the leader of the Indo-Burma Pioneer Mission. Missionaries Elizabeth Elliot and Rachel Sant make first peaceful contact with the Waorani tribe in Ecuador. 1959 Radio Lumiere founded in Haiti by West Indies Mission. Now World Team. Josephine Mackle becomes the first African-American to join Wycliffe Bible Translators. Faber Radio founded in UK. 1960 Kenneth Strachan starts evangelism in depth in Central America. 18,000 people in Morocco reply to newspaper ad by Gospel Missionary Union offering free correspondence course on Christianity. Lauren Cunningham founds Youth with a Mission. The Asia Evangelistic Fellowship, AEF, one of the largest Asian indigenous missionary organizations, is launched in Singapore by G. D. James. 1961 International Missionary Council, IMC, integrated into the World Council of Churches, WCC, and renamed Commission on World Mission and Evangelism, CWME. International Christian radio stations now number 30. 1962 Don Richardson goes to Sawi tribe in Papua New Guinea. Operation Mobilization founded in Mexico by George Verwer. 1963 Theological Education by Extension movement launched in Guatemala by Ralph Winter and James Emery. 1964 Young missionary and pilot Jerry Douglas Witt is presumably shot down over the mining town of Minas Las Coloradas, Zacatecas, Mexico while dropping Gospels of St. John from his Cessna 170B, killing him and a young Mexican national who was with him. In separate incidents, rebels in the Congo kill missionaries Paul Carlson, Phyllis Ryan and Irene Farrell, as well as brutalizing missionary Dr. Helen Rose Veer. Carlson is featured on December 4 Time magazine cover. Hans von Staden of the Dorothea Mission proposes to Patrick Johnston that he write the book now titled Operation World. 1966 Red Guards destroy churches in China. Berlin Congress on Evangelism. Missionaries expelled from Burma. God's Smuggler published. 1967 All foreign missionaries expelled from Guinea. 1968 The Studium Biblicum translation of the Bible is published in Chinese by the Venerable Gabriel Allegra. 1968 Wu Yung and others form the Chinese missions overseas in order to send out missionaries from Taiwan to do cross-cultural ministry. Augustinian order re-established in India. 1969 OMF International begins industrial evangelism to Taiwan's factory workers. 1970 Frankfurt Declaration on Mission. Operation Mobilization launches MV Logos ship. ABP. Makarios 3. Mausgos of Cyprus baptizes 10,000 into the Orthodox Church in Kenya. 1971 Gustavo Gutierrez publishes A Theology of Liberation. 1972 American Society of Missiology founded with Journal Missiology. 1973 services by Billy Graham attract 4.5 million people in 6 cities of Korea. First All-Asia mission consultation convenes in Seoul, Korea with 25 delegates from 14 countries. Mission to the World is founded in Georgia. 1974 Lausanne Congress on World Evangelization takes place in Lausanne, Switzerland. Missiologist Ralph Winter presents the concept of hidden or unreached peoples. Lausanne Covenant is written and ratified. 1975 missionaries Armand Doll and Hugh Friberg imprisoned in Mozambique after communist takeover of government. 1976 U.S. Center for World Mission founded in Pasadena, California. 1600 Chinese assemble in Hong Kong for the Chinese Congress on World Evangelization. Islamic World Congress calls for withdrawal of Christian missionaries. Peace Child by Don Richardson appears in Reader's Digest. 1977 Evangelical Fellowship of India sponsors the All India Congress on Mission and Evangelization. 1978 LCWE Consultation on Gospel and Culture in Willowbank, Bermuda. Columbans enter Taiwan. 1979 Production of Jesus film commissioned by Bill Bright of Campus Crusade for Christ. Ted Fletcher founds Pioneers, a missionary agency with a focus on unreached people groups. Columbian missionaries enter Pakistan at the request of the Bishop of Lahore. 1980 Philippine Congress on Discipling a Whole Nation. Lausanne Congress on World Evangelism Conference in Pattaya. 1981 Colombian terrorists kidnap and kill Wycliffe Bible translator Chet Bitterman. Project Pearl. 1 million Bibles are delivered in a single night to thousands of waiting believers in China. 1982 Story on The New Missionary makes December 27 cover of Time magazine. Andes Evangelical Mission, formerly Bolivian Indian Mission, merges into USIM, formerly Sudan Interior Mission. 1983 Missionary Athletes International, a global soccer ministry, founded by Tim Conrad. 1984 Founding of the Mission Society for United Methodists, a voluntary missionary sending agency within the United Methodist Church. Rebranded in 2006 to the Mission Society. Founding of STEM, short-term evangelical mission teams. Ministry by Roger Peterson signals the rising importance of short-term missions groups. 1985 Founding of Every Child Ministries, a mission organization focused on African children and youth, with special attention to groups of neglected, abused or marginalized children. Founded by John and Lorella Rouster with DR Congo, then Zaire, as its first field of service. 1985 Howard Foltz founds Accelerating International Mission Strategies, AIMS. 1987 Second International Conference on Missionary Kids, MKs, held in Quito, Ecuador. 1989 The Lausanne Congress II on World Evangelization Lausanne II, an Evangelical World Missions Conference, takes place in Manila, Philippines. Concept of 10/40ths window emerges. Adventures in Missions, Georgia. AIM, short-term missions agency founded by Seth Barnes. Etau, video released by New Tribes Mission. 1990 YWAM missionaries Jeff and Else Woodker begin work with Tuareg and Wodere pastoralists in Abalak, Niger. 1991 The Marxist government of Ethiopia is overthrown, and missionaries are able to return to that country. 1992 World Gospel Mission, National Holiness Missionary Society, starts work in Uganda. 1993 Transworld Radio starts broadcasting from a 250,000-watt shortwave transmitter in Russia. Anglican Frontier Missions founded. 1994 Liaban Ibrahim Hassan, a convert to Christianity in Somalia. is martyred by Islamic militants in the capital city of Mogadishu. 1995 missionary Don Cox abducted in Quito, Ecuador. 1996 Nazarenes enter Hungary, Kazakhstan, Pakistan. 1997 Foreign Mission Board and Home Mission Board of Southern Baptist Convention become the International Mission Board and North American Mission Board with 10,000 missionaries. 1999 Transworld Radio goes on the air from Grigoriopol, Moldova, using a 1 million watt AM transmitter. Veteran Australian missionary Graham Stuart Staines and his 2 sons are burned alive by Hindu extremists as they are sleeping in a car in eastern India. 2000 to present. 2000 Asia College of Ministry, ACOM, a Ministry of Asia Evangelistic Fellowship, AEF, was launched by Jonathan James to train national missionaries in Asia. 2001 New Tribes missionaries Martin and Gracia Burnham are kidnapped in the Philippines by Muslim terrorist group. Baptist missionary Roni Bowers and her infant daughter are killed when a Peruvian Air Force jet fires on their small float plane, though severely wounded in both legs. Missionary pilot Kevin Donaldson landed the burning plane on the Amazon River. 2003 publication of Back to Jerusalem called to complete the Great Commission. 3 Chinese church leaders with Paul Hattaway brings Chinese and Korean mission movement to forefront. Coptic priest Fr. Zachariah Botros begins his television and internet mission to Muslims in North Africa, the Middle East, Central Asia, and Western countries, resulting in thousands of conversions. 2004 4 Southern Baptist missionaries are killed by gunmen in Iraq. 2006 Abdul Rahman, an Afghan Christian convert, is forced out of Afghanistan by local Muslim leaders and exiled to Italy. Missionary Vijay Kumar is publicly stoned by Hindu extremists for Christian preaching. 2007 Creole Bible completed, the first translation of the entire Bible into an Australian Indigenous language. 2010 The Third Lausanne Congress on World Evangelization held in Cape Town, South Africa. Footnotes. Anderson, Gerald H. ed. Biographical Dictionary of Christian Missions. Simon and Schuster Macmillan. 1998. Includes 2,400 missionaries. Excerpt. Bainbridge, William F. Around the World Tour of Christian Missions. A Universal Survey. 1882. 583 pages. Full text online. Barrett, David, ed. World Christian Encyclopedia. Oxford University Press. 1982. Bliss, Edwin Munsell, ed. The Encyclopedia of Missions. Descriptive, historical, biographical, statistical, with a full assortment of maps, a complete bibliography, and lists of Bible version, missionary societies, mission stations, and a general index online. Volume 1 1891. 724 pp. Online Volume 2 1891. 726 pp. Copplestone, J. Tremaine. History of Methodist Missions. Volume 4. 20th Century Perspectives. 1973. 1288 pp. Comprehensive World Coverage for Methodists. Online. Etherington, Norman, ed. Missions in Empire. Oxford History of the British Empire Companion Series. 2008. Gailey, Charles R., and Howard Culbertson. Discovering Missions. Beacon Hill Press of Kansas City. 2007. Glazier, Michael and Monica K. Helwig, eds. The Modern Catholic Encyclopedia. Liturgical Press. 2004. Glover, Robert H. The Progress of Worldwide Missions. Rev. by J. Herbert Kane. Harper and Row. 1960. Herbermann, Charles George. The Catholic Encyclopedia. The Encyclopedia Press. 1913. Herzog, Johann Jakob, Philipp Schaff, and Albert Hauck. The New Schaff-Herzog Encyclopedia of Religious Knowledge. 12 volumes. Funk and Wagnalls Company. 1910-11. Kane, J. Herbert. A Concise History of the Christian World Mission. Baker. 1982. Koschork, Klaus, al. 2007. A History of Christianity in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. 1450–1990. A Documentary Sourcebook. W.M. B. Eerdmans Publishing. Excerpt and text search and highly detailed table of contents. Laroutet, Kenneth Scott. A History of Christianity. 2 volume 1975. Latourette, Kenneth Scott. A History of the Expansion of Christianity. 7 volumes. 1938–45. The most detailed scholarly history online in 7 volumes. Mason, Alfred Jewett. Outlines of Missionary History. 1912. Online 362 pp. Moreau, A. Scott, David Burnett, Charles Edward Van Engen and Harold A. Netland. Evangelical Dictionary of World Missions. Baker Book House Company. 2000. Neal, Stephen. A History of Christian Missions. Penguin Books. 1986. Newcomb, Harvey. Encyclopedia of Missions. Containing a comprehensive view of missionary operations throughout the world, with geographical descriptions, and accounts of the social, moral, and religious condition of the people. 1860. 792 pages. Complete text online. Olson, C. Gordon. What in the World is God Doing? Global Gospel Publishers. 2003. Parker, J. Fred. Mission to the World. Nazarene Publishing House. 1988. Pocock, Michael. Galen Van Reenen. Douglas McConnell. The Changing Face of World Missions. Engaging Contemporary Issues and Trends. 2005. 391 pages. Shed, Clarence Prouty. 2 Centuries of Student Christian Movements. Their Origin and Intercollegiate Life. 1934. Online. Tegerian, Eleanor H. and Reva Spector Simon. eds. Conflict, Conquest, and Conversion. 2000 Years of Christian Missions in the Middle East. Columbia University Press. 2012. 280 pages. Focus on the 19th and 20th centuries. Udy, James Stewart. A. Attitudes within the Protestant Churches of the Occident towards the propagation of Christianity in the Orient. An Historical Survey to 1914. Ph.D. Dissertation. Boston University. 1952. Online. Major Scholarly History. Tucker, Ruth. 2004. From Jerusalem to Irian Jaya. Tucker, Ruth. 1988. Guardians of the Great Commission. Walker, Williston. A History of the Christian Church. 1959. Complete text of 200-plus missionary histories pre-1923.